Here's the English translation of Block 1 of 5, maintaining the original content, format, and punctuation. There is a secret that the men of greatest power throughout history knew, but that has been purposefully forgotten, buried under layers of social conditioning. Moral repression disguised as freedom and a culture that has transformed the sacred into the trivial. This secret is not in superficial self-help books. It is not in the productivity strategies that you find anywhere. It is not in the magic formulas for instant success. It is in something much deeper, much more visceral, much closer to your essence than you ever imagined. It is in the very substance of your vitality, in the liquid that carries not only the possibility of generating life, but the primordial energy that can generate empires, works of art, personal revolutions, and spiritual awakening. The question that should burn in your mind now is this: are you daily wasting the fuel that could transform you into the man you were meant to be? Or are you learning the ancient art of transforming impulse into power? We live in an era where pleasure has become a commodity, where the sacred has been profaned by unlimited access, where cheap dopamine has replaced deep satisfaction. The billion-dollar industry that profits from your compulsion has sold you a lie packaged as scientific truth, that ejaculating is healthy, that retaining is repression, that releasing is natural. But what this convenient narrative heads is that every time you surrender to impulse without awareness, every time you seek momentary relief in place of lasting fulfillment, you are literally pouring your life force down the drain of instant gratification. In his deepest and least publicized work, reveals something that the Eastern masters have known for millennia. Sexual energy is the most powerful motivating force that exists in the human being, and when you learn to transmute it, to redirect it, to channel it for higher purposes, you access a level of magnetism, mental clarity, determination, and creative power that most men will never experience. Modern man has been conditioned to see his sexuality as something that needs to be constantly emptied, as if it were a pressure that must be relieved to maintain balance. This mechanistic and reductionist view completely ignores the energetic, psychological, and spiritual dimension of what is happening inside you. When you ejaculate, you are not just releasing seminal fluid. You are releasing testosterone, zinc, essential minerals, complex proteins, but above all, you are releasing something that materialistic science cannot adequately measure: the life force, the chi, the prana, what the alchemists call liquid gold. This substance is not only biological, it is energetic. Each ejaculation not directed toward conscious procreation or deep love is a leakage of power, a silent hemorrhage of your masculine essence. Think for a moment about the men we admire throughout history. Tesla, who remained celibate to channel his energy into inventions that changed the world. Muhammad Ali, who practiced abstinence before fights because he knew it amplified his controlled aggressiveness and his relentless focus. Steve Jobs, who explored Eastern practices of retention and transmutation to access levels of creativity that seemed supernatural. These men were not asexual, they were not repressed, they did not deny their nature. They understood something fundamental. Sexual desire is the engine, but you choose where to direct the vehicle. You can drive in circles, burning fuel without going anywhere, or you can chart a route and use all that power to reach extraordinary destinations. The journey begins when you recognize that what we call libido is not just desire for sex, it is the desire for life, for expression, for creation, for conquest, for transcendence. Freud was partially correct when he identified sexuality as a primal force, but he was wrong in not understanding that this force can be sublimated, elevated, transformed. Jung went further when talking about the integration of opposites, about the inner alchemy where the lead of compulsion turns into the gold of mastery. Napoleon Hill was even more direct, stated categorically that every man of great achievement had an intense sexual life, but not in the sense of rampant promiscuity, but in the sense of consciously possessing and directing this creative and magnetic energy. When you retain your vital essence, something alchemical begins to happen in your organism and in your psyche. In the early days, you feel restlessness, an energy that seeks to escape, that pushes you towards the old patterns of quick relief. This is the phase of inner conflict, where the warrior within you is being tested. It is here that most men give up, because they confuse discomfort with something wrong, because they have been programmed to seek comfort above all else. But it is exactly in this and discomfort where transformation dwells. This accumulated energy doesn't disappear, it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't make you sick. It begins to circulate through your body in a different way. Taoist practices call this the microcosmic orbit, where sexual energy rises up the spine, nourishes the brain, activates higher centers of consciousness. Modern science is only beginning to validate what the ancients always knew, that there is a direct relationship between seminal retention and increased testosterone, cognitive improvement, intensified focus, and elevated mood. But let's go beyond the physical. Let's enter the territory where few dare to tread, the realm of shadow and projection. Every time you seek compulsive masturbation, every time you spend hours navigating in search of increasingly intense stimuli to awaken a dulled nervous system, you are not just relieving sexual tension. You're running away. Running away from what? From your existential loneliness, from the emptiness you feel when you stop and are alone with your thoughts, from the anxiety about your future, from the repressed anger that you don't know how to express, from the deep sadness that has never been processed, from the fear of not being enough, of not being loved, of not being loved, of not being respected. Uncontrolled sexual impulse is always a symptom of something deeper. It is a desperate attempt to feel alive, to feel powerful, to experience intensity in a life that has become numb and meaningless. Carl Jung taught us that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. Your compulsive patterns with sexuality are not just biological, they are psychological and spiritual. They are the external manifestation of unhealed internal wounds. Perhaps it is the rejection you felt in adolescence that made you seek validation through sexual conquest or pornographic fantasy. Perhaps it is the absence of a father who would teach you what it means to be a real man, leaving you adrift to discover masculinity through distorted images and performers who sell a fiction. Perhaps it is the social pressure to be hypersexual, to prove your virility through how often you ejaculate, as if quantity replaced quality, as if quantity replaced quality, as if dissipation were synonymous with potency. The inconvenient truth that needs to be said is this: the man enslaved by his sexual impulses is not free. He is the most chained of all. He believes he is exercising his freedom, but he is only reacting to the same conditioned stimuli as a lab rat that presses the dopamine lever. Real freedom is being able to feel the desire, recognize it, honor it, and then consciously decide what to do with it. That is power, that is mastery, That is what separates the ordinary man from the extraordinary man. Now, I need to speak directly to you, who are watching this and feeling something resonate within your chest. Something that tells you that this message is true, even if uncomfortable. If you've made it this far on this journey with me, it's because there's a part of you that's tired of living on autopilot, that's tired of wasting your vital energy on cycles that lead nowhere, that's ready for real transformation. I create this content not because it's popular, not because it generates easy money, but because it's necessary. It is a mission to restore to the modern man the ancestral knowledge that was stolen from him. But I can only continue producing increasingly profound content, revealing increasingly hidden layers of this journey of transmutation, if I know that there is a community of conscious warriors who are committed to this transformation. Therefore, if this message is touching something real in you, if you want to be part of this brotherhood of men who are rediscovering their true power, subscribe to this channel now and activate the notification bell. Not because I need numbers, but because you need these reminders, these provocations, these insights that can save you from years lost in self-destructive patterns. Each video I publish is a tool of war against programmed mediocrity. Subscribe because you deserve to have access to this complete arsenal. Now, let's go deeper. When you start the practice of conscious retention, you are not simply stopping doing something, you are entering a process of death and rebirth. The death of the reactive, impulsive man, enslaved by his biological urges. The birth of the conscious, deliberate man, master of his energy and director of his destiny. This process is not linear, it is not easy, it is not comfortable. In the early days, you will face intense temptations. Your mind will bombard you with justifications whose tones won't make a difference. You need to relieve the tension. This is repression. It's harmful. Recognize these voices for what they are. Echoes of the old pattern trying to stay alive, trying to pull you back into the comfort zone of inconscience. But if you persist, if you weather the initial storm, something extraordinary begins to manifest. You wake up with more energy. Your eyes shine differently in the mirror. Your voice has more presence, more resonance, more authority. You walk differently, occupy different space, project a different frequency. The people around you begin to notice, even if they can't explain what has changed. Women feel an inexplicable attraction because they are responding to your more charged energetic field, to your magnetic presence. Men respect you more because they instinctively recognize that you are not operating on the same level of consciousness as the masses. Opportunities begin to appear because you are radiating a frequency of abundance, of contained power, of potential about to manifest. Napoleon Hill called this sex transmutation and dedicated an entire chapter of Think and Grow Rich to this concept, although it is the least discussed and least understood chapter. He observed that men of great material success possessed a highly developed sexual nature, but had learned the art of channeling this energy into their ambitions. He was not talking about Victorian repression, Puritan denial, mortification of the flesh. He was talking about something much more sophisticated, the recognition that the same energy that can be dissipated in 15 seconds of fleeting pleasure can be redirected to hours of intense creative work, to brilliant business strategies, to works of art that transcend generations, to inventions that transform civilizations. Think of sexual energy as a powerhouse within you. When you ejaculate constantly, It's as if you're using that powerhouse to turn on a light bulb for a few seconds and then turning everything off. When you retain and transmute it, it's as if you're accumulating energy in that powerhouse and then connecting it to larger projects, to more ambitious dreams, to achievements that require sustained power and not just momentary peaks. That is the difference between the man who lives from gratification to gratification and the man who builds legacies. The practice of retention also forces you to confront your emotional dependencies. If you used masturbation as anesthesia to deal with the stress, you will have to develop more mature ways of processing your emotions. If you used pornography as an escape from reality, you will have to face your reality head-on and begin to change it. If you used orgasm as a substitute for real human connection, you will have to learn true vulnerability, deep intimacy, love without masks. All of these are necessary evolutions. All of these are rites of passage from boy to man, from unconscious to conscious, from animal to fully realized human. The Taoist masters developed sophisticated practices of sexual cultivation that include breathing techniques, visualization, energy movement, and even ways to experience orgasm without ejaculation. Hindu Tantra offers similar paths, where the sexual act becomes meditative, ceremonial, spiritual. These traditions did not arise from repression, but from deep observation of human nature and the recognition that there is a fundamental difference between sacred sexuality and profane sexuality, between sex that generates life and expansion of consciousness and sex that generates depletion and contraction of consciousness. Modern neuroscience is beginning to map what happens in the brain during prolonged retention. Dopamine receptors begin to resensitize after years of bombardment by supernormal stimuli. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning and impulse control, strengthens. The amygdala, center of fear and anxiety, calms down. There is evidence that retention significantly increases testosterone levels in the first 7 to 10 days, and then the levels stabilize at a higher level. But again, we are talking about something that goes beyond the merely physical. We are talking about a complete reconfiguration of how you relate to desire, pleasure, power, and purpose. The journey of sexual transmutation is essentially an alchemical journey. The medieval alchemists, when they spoke of transforming lead into gold, were using symbolic language to talk about transforming the raw material of animal nature into the spiritual gold of enlightened consciousness. The great work, the magnum opus, was not an external chemical process, but an internal refinement process. And at the center of this great work was always the work with sexual energy, seen as the most potent raw material, the most intense fire, the substance that could dissolve and reconfigure the entire structure of being. You become an alchemist when you decide to stop being a victim of your compulsions and start being the conscious operator of the laboratory of your own psyche. The Athanor, the alchemical furnace, is my own body. Fire is your sexual energy maintained and intensified. The sealed container, where the transformation happens, is your determination not to leak that energy. And the gold that eventually emerges is the most potent, most magnetic, most accomplished version of who you are capable of being. But be warned, I am not suggesting that you should never ejaculate. That sexuality is a sin, that pleasure is the enemy. That would just be another form of destructive dualism. What I am stating is that there is a monumental difference between compulsive, unconscious ejaculation, desperate for relief, and conscious ejaculation. within a context of deep intimacy, true love, or procreative intention. The former drains you. The latter can be an act of communion, of celebration, of sacred creation. The difference is not in the physical act itself, but in the quality of consciousness that you bring to it. The man who masters his sexual energy is like a warrior who has mastered his most powerful weapon. He is not afraid of it, does not reject it, does not hide it, he knows it intimately, respects its power, and wields it with deadly precision when necessary. The rest of the time it is kept, loaded, ready, radiating potential even without being fired. This is the essence of what ancient texts called brahmacharya, often translated as celibacy, but more precisely understood as conscious management of life force. As you advance in this practice, you will also begin to notice a natural cleansing happening in your life. Superficial relationships will fall away, because you will no longer have the energy to sustain connections that do not add real value. Mediocre habits will dissolve, because your internal standard of quality has risen. Greater ambitions will arise, because you have more energy available to commit to them. Your tolerance for drama, for distraction, for wasted time, will decrease dramatically because you are operating on a different frequency. There is also a spiritual dimension that cannot be ignored. All the great mystical traditions speak of the ascent of energy through the spine, from the root chakra to the crown chakra. The Kundalini of the Hindu tradition, the holy grail of Christian legends, the elixir of immortality in Taoism. All of these are symbols pointing to the same reality. Sexual energy, when not dissipated down and out, naturally rises, activating higher centers of consciousness, clairvoyance, heightened intuition, frequent synchronicities, a sense of connection with something greater than you. All of these can be side effects of a sustained practice of retention and transmutation. But don't romanticize the process too much. There will be dark days. There will be moments where you will feel restless, irritated, unable to concentrate because all that energy is looking for channels of expression and you have not yet fully developed those channels. This is where complementary practices come in: intensive physical exercise to burn off excess energy, meditation to calm the agitated mind, creative work to give vent to accumulated energy, breathing practices to circulate the energy through the body, exposure to cold to strengthen discipline, fasting to deepen control over impulses, rating to process what is emerging from the unconscious. Seminal retention, when practiced correctly, is not an isolated practice, but the center of an entire lifestyle geared towards excellence, towards mastery, towards self-realization. It requires and simultaneously develops discipline, patience, self-awareness, courage to confront your shadows, humility to recognize your weaknesses, and determination to persevere even when every cell in your body is screaming for the old form of easy relief. And here is the final truth, the revelation that justifies this whole journey. The man who masters his sexual energy does not become a superhuman because he has acquired new powers, but because he has removed the chains that prevented him from accessing the powers that have always been there. Within you, at this very moment, there is a sleeping potential waiting to be awakened. There is a creative force, a relentless determination, a clarity of vision, a magnetic presence, a capacity for achievement that you can barely imagine. But that force cannot emerge as long as you continue to leak your vital essence in empty pursuits of fleeting pleasure. The path of sexual transmutation is not the path of denial, it is the path of total affirmation of life in its highest expression. It is saying yes to deep intimacy, not to superficial connections. It is saying yes to intense creativity, not to passive entertainment. It is saying yes to challenges that expand you, not to comforts that shrink you. It is choosing to be the fire that illuminates and transforms, not the ashes that are left after the fire has consumed itself without purpose. Napoleon Hill was right when he said that sexual energy is the fuel of all great achievements. But he also knew that this fuel can be wasted in small, undirected explosions, or it can be contained, compressed, and released in a single, directed explosion that breaks all barriers between you and your goals. The difference between mediocrity and greatness lies not in whether or not you have this energy. All men possess it, but in knowing what to do with it. You are at a crossroads now. One path leads back to the old patterns, to momentary relief followed by emptiness and shame, to the slow dissipation of your life force, until you wake up one day and realize you have become a shadow of what you could have been. The other path is steep, challenging, lonely at times, but it leads to a version of yourself that possesses natural magnetism, that creates opportunities where others see obstacles, that lives with intensity and purpose, that leaves a legacy that becomes a respected ancestor for future generations. This is not an invitation to perfection. You will fall. You will fall. You will fall. There will be relapses, but each time you rise, each time you return to practice with renewed determination, you are forging something indestructible within you. You are building a character that no external circumstance can break, an internal power that no external force can steal, a spiritual flame that no darkness can extinguish. Semen retention amplifies your natural masculine energy, not because it adds something that wasn't there, but because it removes the constant drain that was preventing you from experiencing your true voltage. It's like the difference between a constantly drained battery and a fully charged battery. The potential always existed. You just weren't allowing it to accumulate and manifest in its fullness. And when you finally master this ancient art, when you become the master and no longer the slave, when you can feel the desire burning within you and consciously choose how and when to express that energy, you will understand what the ancient sages meant when they spoke of becoming a god incarnate, a fully realized man, a spiritual warrior operating at the peak of his power. The time to be driven by unconscious impulses is over. The time to react mechanically to programmed stimuli is over. The time to leak your life force in pursuit of empty pleasure is over. Now is the time for you to rise, gather your scattered energy, seal the sacred vessel of your body, ignite the fire of transformation, and watch as the lead of your lower nature is transmuted into the glittering gold of your higher nature. This is the great work. This is the path of the conscious warrior. This is the secret that was hidden from you, but that is now revealed. What you do with this knowledge will determine not only your superficial happiness, but the very destiny of your soul, and the legacy you will leave engraved in eternity. Choose wisely, choose consciously, choose power.